So as time goes by, but there was sort of an act of God that happened. I'm trying to get the date. It would be about Thanksgiving, 1982. We either got a letter. I think it was a letter from the president that we were going to downsize. So they came out with this lead balloon program that people usually would call gold balloons. And it looked fairly good. You had to be over 50 and 20 years company time. And what else? 20 years.
You had to work 20 years and you had to be over 50. And I think that was all. And you could take this retirement, early retirement.
I guess that was the main two things. I thought there was another one. Anyway, as it worked out, so I meet that very easily. I'm 54.
Oh, 54.
But everybody else that was over 50, their kids were all through college. I had a boy in grade 1, a boy in grade 2, and a boy in grade 7. So if I take this early retirement, how can I afford to support this family? It was a tremendous worry. But also, I'm getting rid of this frustration. And I said, if I don't take this, they're going to fire me in 3 months anyway. Because the management thinks that they can hire somebody out of college for half the money that I'm making and do the same job. And they might be computer literate, whereas we guys weren't. Guys. So I said, I really agonized over this. If I don't, they're going to, and then I won't even have some of the benefits I'm going to be getting. I forget what, not very much, but some. And so, fortunately, my big ace in the hole was I had started my own plastic company 9 years earlier, in 1974, just in my garage in Aloha, not far from where we are right now. And I started it with the smallest molding machine probably ever commercially made. It was a Simplematic, and it could only shoot 1/3 of an ounce, which is a very small part. It would be about as big as the end, that much of my, maybe about a part that would be a 1/2 inch cube, would be about as big a part as it could shoot. But if you look into electronic instruments, there's a lot of little parts like that. So before this retirement came, I'd upgraded that. I designed a machine around this one, but much improved, and designed it where it would shoot an ounce. Now, an ounce with the regulation machines is a big machine, but mine wasn't as big as that center cabinet there. I designed a small, powerful hydraulic machine that was air over oil, you called it, where it had a hydraulic clamp, but air injection. Now, what's good about that, one of the secrets of molding, well, I told you one, is have the dry material, which I had dryers. Well, we just used a household oven, but if you watch it, that works. But the other one is fast fill. You want to fill that mold as fast as you can with, I put a huge cylinder on this molding machine, which normally would have a cylinder about this big. I had one, and this is a big multiplier. When you go from this to this, it's not twice as much, it's 10 times as much, with a long stroke. And I had an air exhaust system. It was called a quick exhaust system. So that thing would come down, wham, like that, and the mold was full, like that. And then it meant you could have fast cycles. You could run the material colder. That one of the other secrets is run the material as cold as you can, but where it still looks nice. If it gets too cold, it has wrinkles on it. But as soon as you get rid of those wrinkles, that's where you run it. You can run fast, and every part will be good. And the colder you run, the less chance, even if there's moisture in the material, it won't come to the surface. It's just buried in there somewhere. So most people run it too hot. There's moisture comes to the surface, rejects everywhere. Anyway, so I'd planned for that. So it was still operating over here. I had my nephew, Earl Trask. A lot of people let his dad, Warren Trask, sure you get his, it was the one that recommended me for Tektronix.
Oh, really?
And got me down here in the first place and recommended me to Ash Aschenbrenner as a good, reliable person.
Mm-hmm.
And
Earl went on to work at Lattice, didn't he?
Earl later on went to work for a lot of these, Norm Winningstad, you've heard about.
Mm-hmm.
So many companies separated. Warren, my nephew, worked for 3 or 4 of those, and he got some good experience running my molding company. So anyway, he was between jobs. So when we moved to Vancouver, I was running a little swing shift where he'd come down in the evening, and because I was still working over here, but I mostly worked on weekends on my home project.
Mm-hmm.
So he'd come every evening, put in about 3. By this time, we're getting a few customers. So I would call Earl and say, I'm thinking about taking this early retirement. And do you think we can both maybe survive over there? Well, we seem to think so. But anyway, then, okay, I'm taking my early retirement, which I did.
How many people were eligible for that retirement?
That's a good story. My recollection is it was 900 people eligible
Mm-hmm.
that were over 50
Mm-hmm.
and had been 27 years with the company. And anyway, the story I remember is Tech did a survey of other big companies that had offered this same thing. And they found out something like 10% of the people would take it.
Mm.
Well, I mentioned that things were in a downhill mode. 90% of the people took it.
Oh, really?
Not
Wow.
10%.
Wow.
So that right there tells you how these old timers felt about the
Mhm.
company. Not just me. And we were all hoping that the company could turn around. But most of us thought they had 24,000 people. We thought all they needed was 16,000. So even getting rid of 1,000 was nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And it proved that they needed to get rid of way more.
Mm-hmm.
But so anyway, the time arrives, and what a relief. I just come home, I'm a changed man. Couldn't wait to get up to work again.
Uh-huh.
But I was driving from Vancouver with this old van we had, what was that, a 62?
Oh yeah,
Nice old Econoliner. And I drove to work. My family was still there, you see. I drove over each morning, can't wait to get to work, and worked all day, and Earl worked and I worked. Well, as time went by, there really wasn't enough work for us, and Earl was wanting to, he already had some education, much more than I did, a couple of years of college.
Mm-hmm.
So there was some opening in, what's the one that John went to?
PCC.
PCC. It was, what was it called?
The program was something to do with processes and wafers.
Circuit boards, and, wafers,
Yeah,
the wafer.
and he went through that program, and he ended up, I think, wasn't he at Planar when he was
Yeah,
there?
but he went as a technician.
Yeah, technician.
Now the technicians, when it comes to hands-on, usually know more than the engineers, because they really learn the hands-on. The engineers know all about the how to figure things out, So he became very successful. He worked for Lattice was one of the places, and Mentor Graphics was it.
I don't know.
And he worked for about 3 or 4 places that were all startups from Tech and did very well. Rose kind of like I did. There's an expression of that. He rose up to his level of incompetency. Have you heard that expression before? We used it quite a bit at Tech.
Uh-huh.
So in my case, the way I used that was I rose to a level that I felt comfortable with. I didn't want to go up where I was over my head.
Mm-hmm.
So that was me. Now, the people that really get ahead, and you got to admire it for them, they go beyond that comfort level and stick it out.
Mm-hmm.
But I wasn't of that nature. So Earl went on to great things. He's actually retired now at 55, down in Hemet for the winter in San Diego, living a good life. Has pensions coming from Tech, I expect, and some of these other companies.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you didn't drive very long. We moved back here in October.
Well, that was quite a long time.
Yeah.
May,
Yeah, so.
June, July, and October.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
quite a few months.
And the kids, they
They were so happy.
we still
to
had
be
our
back.
house. We didn't sell our
Oh, they were
house, so we had the
happy to
same
be
house.
back.
Oh, and all their friends, and they went to the same
'Cause we
school.
were only gone about 2 years,
Mm-hmm.
so they
But-
were thrilled to come back.
But anyway, so everybody was happy.
Mm-hmm.
So where are we now?
Did you have any friends outside of work that maybe you had a relationship with Tektronix?
Well, yes, Bill. Oh, this is an important story. Bill,
Cheshire?
my best friend I ever had in Tektronix. Bill lived over here beside us.
Oh, oh gosh, I hate not being able to remember names.
He's such a famous guy. Bill, well, we'll think of it.
And Carolyn? Is that
Yeah,
what?
yeah, Bill and Carolyn. What's their last name?
Oh, it'll come to me in a minute.
Anyway,
Benedict.
Yeah,
Bill
Bill
Benedict.
Benedict. Okay.
Now, make a note of his, because I want to tell you when I first met him.
Mm-hmm.
So, when I was in, about the time Kennedy came through,
Mm-hmm.
so that'd be about 62. I was the unit manager of plastics quality control, range 12 at the time. But I only had 3 or 4 people working under me because we were very efficient. People got ahead. They built up big empires and said, well, look at me, I have all these people, I should get paid more.
Mm-hmm.
Should have been the opposite. We guys that ran efficient should have got paid more.
Mhm.
But anyway, I digress. So anyway, I had to get some kind of an electronic piece of equipment to check something. Now I've forgotten what it was. So I called up and they gave me somebody that built those kind of things. And they gave me a name, Bill Benedict. So he said, oh, I'll be right over. So he came over. The guy, he'd be at the time, I'm not sure if he's even, no, I don't think he's married. At the time, he looked like he was about my age. Maybe younger, but anyway, he looked a picture of an engineer. Looked very, but I found him extremely shy. I told him what I want. Oh, yeah. And he absorbed it right away. I didn't have to, this and that and the other thing. Okay. He said, that's fine. And so he went back to where he worked in Building 50. And the next day he had this piece of testing equipment for me. And so through the years, I think that's the only thing he made for me. But in what year did they build those houses there? In 1980, when we came back, in about 1984.
No, it was before we left. They were built way before we left, weren't they?
Oh,
I think it was before we left, sure.
yeah, okay, so it's important to me, not you, but,
It was
sure.
in the 70s because our kids played with
Were
us.
they about the same age?
Yeah, our children were the same age as their children.
So I would say, just as a reference, about 1974, they moved into the next street to us in a brand new house. His wife was Carolyn, and she has a famous brother. The famous brother is Richard Van
Grunsman.
Grunsven. And why he is famous, he makes more airplanes, flyable airplanes, than Boeing does.
Mm-hmm.
Kits.
The kits, but they're flyable. You can do these things with them. And so anyway, being as Bill Benedict's, Bill must have taken retirement when I took retirement.
I think so, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, we had moved to another house only a few blocks farther, but still close to Bill, you see. And in 1987, that's a few years later. So I needed some wiring done because I'm putting a big molding machine into a big garage there. It was as long as, well, not as long as this room, half as long. Just like those big ones at Tech that were
Looked like
so
a freight
big.
train engine.
Big, but it could shoot about 6 ounces. So he came over and helped me get it wired and all this stuff because I had to get more household power. And he would hardly charge. I regret myself that I didn't double whatever he asked.
Didn't he go to work about that time for Vance aircraft?
Yeah, yeah. And he had a design. He went to manage Van's aircraft. Now they're over in North Plains. Did you know the story of that? Do you?
Yeah.
They're over in North Plains now, and he's the manager. But before he became manager, I taught him how to be a molding.
How to be a molder.
Because he went to work for Davis. Davis is a guy that you
Davis
might want.
Tool.
Davis Tool was a guy that was a real sharp guy.
Ron Davis.
In the Ron Davis.
Ron.
In the model shop department at Tech, where you had to be a superior mold maker. Well, about what time would that be roughly? About 19.
Gosh, it would have been before.
Well, probably about 1975. He started Davis Tooling in Hillsborough. Is it that what it's called,
Yeah,
Davis Tooling?
Davis Tooling.
And it was for machining parts, and his big contract was Boeing. And he was one of the first guys that got into CNC, where he could build very complicated parts. In fact, it was before
They
1983.
were doing a lot of stuff with that really elaborate metal. What's it called? I remember they had a clean room.
Titanium?
They had a clean room where they were doing
Oh,
it.
yeah.
I saw it one time.
Anyway, you can still go through his plant. He would be an interesting guy to interview, much more so than me. Anyway, Bill knew about me molding and all. In fact, we made an impossible part for the airplanes. It's the one the pilot will hold on the stick. It's a plastic part, and it has a little hole here in the front where you can hook a machine gun up to it. And when you pull that, it shoots the bullets
And
between the props.
They
They're
sold those
timed.
planes to Nigeria or someplace.
Yeah, they got a contract for 100 of these planes to sell to Nigeria, but they needed guns on them. Before that, they didn't have guns, and they had this very sophisticated where they had places for your fingers to go, and they had a wooden model of it. It's all they had. So I took it to another fella that was a genius as far as making things. He's in jail now.
Oh yeah,
Larson.
Dave Larson.
Dave Larson. You should almost work that in, but you can leave that jail part. He worked out of his home, and he worked for Tektronix in the model department in Wilsonville. So I took this to him, this wooden thing to him, and he made a mold, very reasonable. I can't believe it was about $1,000. A regular big mold maker would have cost us $10,000 for it. So we made this mold, put it in, got the first shot. Sometimes you have trouble with the first. Got the first shot, gave it to Bill.
The thing was they were very low usage. They just wanted a few hundred parts.
Well, they wanted 100 to start with.
Yeah, but that's low usage for plastic.
Yeah, oh yeah. But nobody else likes that small usage.
Yeah, the parts aren't cost anything. It's the mold that
So
costs.
anyway,
them.
Bill was
Yeah.
very happy with that. And he looked through our molding company, and he was a quick learner, so he could see just by looking at it how it works. Top engineer, electronic engineer that was also an electrical engineer. A lot of electronic engineers don't know household. It's kind of a different thing, but he knew both. So all of a sudden, Ron Davis needs more help out there. And he was the best friend of Ron Davis. They were just like this. But, he only worked for Ron Davis for a while. And then Ron decided to start a molding business. So he bought brand new sophisticated machines right off the bat. So, and put Bill in charge of that division. So Bill had me out a couple of times to help him a little bit with what little bit I knew, and also he came to my boys, and got a few little ideas. If he had problems, would help him. So, but he only worked doing that 6 months. And then he went to work for the airplane guy. And part of it, I think, was, I think he had a little trouble working with his best friend. Because his best friend wasn't happy till your nose was bleeding. He wanted you to work that hard.
Oh, wow.
And that's the way most people that work for Ron Davis don't last very long. But a guy, remember this guy that came to me?
Oh, what was the guy that
In
used to make molds
1983,
for
when
us?
I first came back, I got a call from a fella. He saw my name in this little one line in the phone book. Advertising was so expensive. There was no Craigslist. And he just lived over here behind Amelia's.
And he did some work for us, and we sent him to Davis Tool, and he got
No.
a job at Davis Tool.
Well, let me start the story, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, he made something for me. And then he just worked out of his house. So I could see he was a sharp guy. So anyway, he was almost crying one day because there was a big, in 83
In
there
the
was a
early
huge
80s, it was
recession.
terrible.
Mhm.
Almost like now,
Mhm.
but it didn't last as long. He was almost crying. Well, did I have any work for him? So I did find little things that he could make, little tools that I need. And I'd go over to his house. He had a wonderful wife. I've forgotten about his children, I'm not sure. But anyway, then I'm not sure if he asked me, if I said, and he knew CNC. A lot of people didn't know CNC. So I said, I don't know if I suggested Ron Davis or if he suggested to me.
I think we
So I said, well,
suggested it.
yeah, and I'll give you a good recommendation, which I did. So he got on, and a few years ago, he was still there. So
Yeah.
I told him, boy, with Ron, don't make any mistakes. He'll fire you on the spot, just like that. And so I know 20 years later, in fact, I'm going to go over and see him one of these
Yeah, you
days
should.
when we think of his name. but you do want to interview Ron Davis.
Mhm.
But that led me to another name that you want to interview, who it did come up in this conversation, was Bill Benedict. He died,
Oh, in
Did
a
you
plane
know that he
crash with
died?
his son. He and his son were both killed.
Oh, his son
Terribly
was like,
sad.
Bill then gradually, at least he wasn't shy. He came out of that. Maybe it was after he got married or something. And he had the nicest little boy that played
Same
with my
age as
boy.
our son, yeah.
He was so shy. When I asked him, I'd say, what was his favorite
Jeremy.
answer? He always had the same answer. I'd ask him something like, what'd you learn in school today, Jeremy? And he'd say nothing. Or it was always a one-word, because he didn't want. Now, he played good with my kids, but
But didn't want to talk.
So anyway, he went to PCC, to college. And he got to be the valedictorian there. And he got a little bit political. And he got up where he could make speeches and everything. And part of that was because when he got old enough, he started taking flying lessons.
He went to
Mhm.
His
University
dad
of
became a
Portland.
pilot, too.
University
Okay.
of Portland
And they
was very
flew
good.
these planes.
Yeah.
And he went, there's a good story on the website about him. You should be able to look it up. Jeremy Benedict. He went over to some place like Manchuria or someplace, and they sold a kit to a guy, and he went over there and showed him how to put it together, and he helped him fly and everything. Interesting story. But then, what was I leading up to here about the plane? Oh, well then, is it about 8 years ago now?
Oh, yes.
They were
It's
flying to
horrible.
Florida, both pilot, Jeremy and his dad. They have their planes. Fortunately, they sit side by side,
Mhm.
which is great.
Yeah.
How to learn, They're flying back to Florida. They used to go to the big place that's called Oshkosh. Have you heard of
Yeah,
Oshkosh?
yeah, I've heard of that.
They
yeah.
flew there every year, and then also to Florida. This place, the same thing.
Mhm.
So they're flying, and I think they were going over Kansas. And the farmer in the field said he heard a loud noise, and he saw a plane going straight down, bang into the ground. Well, that was the end of Bill.
It was
and
terrible.
Jeremy.
I heard it on the radio driving to work because I was still working.
Now
at
that
the
would be
time.
about 10 years ago.
Yeah,
wouldn't
so
it?
I had to go in and tell my kids, here's this
Oh.
friend of theirs,
Yeah.
and our friend. It was really awful.
But if
Yeah.
you want to read about that, you can look that up too.
Oh, okay.
And anyway, so that was so sad for the family.
Yeah.
Again, they have a sister too. So sad for her.
What about
But-
the guy that was in the wine, that has the winery now?
Oh, John Covey?
Was he?
Oh, yeah, you've already interviewed John Cobb.
Yeah, I think
They're
someone
going to
is doing
interview
it,
him
yeah.
later this year.
You knew that Howard Wallem considered him the top engineer of all of the engineers they had.
Wow, really?
And I think I told you that he just had a high school education, because that was my story. But then reading elsewhere, I think maybe he had 1 or 2 years of college, but probably PCC.
You know, Lee has a couple of stories about Howard. You should tell that story about him fixing the toaster, because that was
Oh,
such
he
a
knows
great
that.
story.
That's in you read the Blue Book,
Mhm.
yeah?
Mhm.
That's in there, isn't it? About
That's
the
Yeah.
such a
toaster?
great story.
Yeah. But my big hero, and I think you've already read this, the book that Tippery wrote. Have you read his book?
No.
Miles Tippery. Did you loan that to somebody?
No, I think we still have it, but they have a copy of it at the museum.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've read some excerpts from it.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I was wondering if Howard at the end might have got dementia. 'Cause have you seen his last interview that was on TV, Channel 10?
Maybe, yeah, I think.
Well, you can look that up again. But when he talks about starting the company, unless they had a fallout, he never mentions Miles Tippery once. Tippery, and he mentions quite firm that the people that started the company was he and Jack and the other two fellas that I just momentarily forgot. Two other fellas. So I'm thinking that he and Miles must have had a falling out, and it could possibly be. You know, I told you about Blanche Cook being the one that was in personnel at. Well, I didn't know it at the time, but her boss was Mrs. Tippery. She was over
I see.
personnel, but they might have they left Tech, I think maybe a year before we come, so she would have gone. What happened? Did you ever hear the story about the mysterious sickness in Portland in
No.
1953? Oh, this is part of your story. You got to get this in. Well, you know Bob Davis.
Mm-hmm.
He was one of the top guys.
Mm-hmm.
He was in the Coast Guard too, like Howard Wallem, or not Howard Wallem, but Murdoch and Tippery and Davis were all in the Coast Guard.
Okay, yeah.
Anyway, you can read about this somewhere, because I might not have it exact. But Bob Davis had this beautiful wife that I think was 23 years old. And they just started at Tech, maybe a couple of years. He was high up right away because of his background. And she died at 23. There was a mysterious disease came to Portland, Oregon. I don't think anywhere else. And there was maybe 3 or 4 people died from this. And they didn't know what it was. They were testing it. And what happened was Miles Tippery got the same thing, what they thought it was the same thing. He didn't die. But all of a sudden, he couldn't work. He got so, he had just built a house where the hospital is now, right across Barnes Road.
Mm-hmm.
Got a hell of it. Bought 5 acres, so built a beautiful house. And then he got this disease where it's all downhill, and he could walk about like this to go to work. So this went on, and he wasn't getting any better. And he was from the old school, at least in his book, that he said, the old school, you can't, he was vice president of something. And he was one of the old school that couldn't take a big paycheck without doing something. So this was causing him mental anguish. But I'm wondering if maybe he hadn't had a little fallout with Howard about the same time because of the fact that Howard doesn't mention his name. So I think Jack was still living there. I think he was more of a... But you've heard of Earl, remember Earl's last name? Earl, no, another Earl. Earl, have you come across another Earl, big high guy? Earl, anyway, he was a kind of a confidant. And Earl told him about a place for sale up on, what's that island you went to?
Yeah, in the San Juans.
In the San Juans.
Oh.
Do you know that story? I won't go into.
Yeah,
you know
I think
he
I've
bought
heard of that
that.
one.
So
Yeah.
this Earl guy got him onto that. So he sold this property and
Mhm.
went up there. And I believe that when I came back, I went to work at Tech in '56, I remember going into the lunchroom, and it sticks in my mind that Miles Tippery had come back and made a little talk to the people about how the company got started. And I'm quite sure it was him, but it doesn't show up in any of the literature I've read. But a very impressive guy, little guy, but impressive. So we've gone off on an awful lot of tangents. Where are we?
I was wondering if you participated in any of the training programs that Tektronix.
Well, you know,
Don't you remember MTM?
which one?
MTM.
Oh yes, what was that?
Motion time
That was the
management.
beginning of the down. I went to
Okay.
MTM. You know what that is?
Motion time
Well,
management.
the way I was in quality control, but also one example, they had molding machines. Not near as good as mine, but that's another story. The girl would be sitting here when I first started, and they had a small mold, because there were a lot of small parts. Heavy. It weighed 2 or 3. She had to slide it into the molding machine, push a button, and it would close, and then push another button. And in about a minute, it would open, and she'd pull it out, and a heavy die she would pull apart, and get the part out. And at the end of the day, I don't know why that Morton didn't have carpal. But it wasn't a word that wasn't popular. Now everybody has carpal. But I don't remember anybody having carpal. And they were doing the same sorts of things. Anyway, so we would time them. What we would do, the best operator that they had, that had maybe 4 girls running these machines. So we'd go to the best operator and watch her and break down the time. And so, okay, this girl could get 60 parts an hour. Well, standards are always usually higher than you expect to meet, but they're standards. So we'll say 60 parts an hour. So if you made 50 parts an hour, you were within the standard. So you always set the standard a little bit high. So this happened about the time Earl Wantland took over as president, I think. Anyway, and the chief engineer, what was one of the top guys over the engineers, can kick out a few names for me, was this guy. I'm sure he's a sharp guy, but he wanted to go sophisticated. So sophisticated that ruined the quality control department, because you're trying to work with ordinary people and teach them sophisticated techniques that in no way will they understand. Even we supervisors had trouble with it. And so it was all screwed up instead of doing a simple system that worked. We didn't have a problem. We had rejects, but a tolerable level. So anyway, they set this program up where I had to go to it and a bunch of other sort of key people, some of the lead men on the floor, a little above an average working person. And we took the MTM, motion time
management.
I guess.
I remember it so well. 'Cause
Here's
he would
this
come
girl
home
on the
going,
machine. Here's this girl on the machine. I forget where we start, but we'll start with here's the mold. First of all, here's the mold. We'll start with it right in front of her. So okay, then the machine opens. She's starting fresh. So it takes her 6 inches to slide that in. So to slide something weighing a half a pound, 6 inches, according to books, it takes 3 seconds. Then she has to reach 8 inches down to push a button. And now to reach with your hand 8 inches, it takes 2 seconds. And then you do so you add all this up. So the cycle is 60 seconds, maybe the same, but probably not. Probably way more in reality. So then, when new products come on the line, that's the way they did it. So they would make a new mold. So then there'd be a girl out there studying how long it took to mold, because this is a bigger mold with different weight. So pathetic. Because number one, the person doing the molding is maybe a beginner. But the one doing this was sort of a graduate. She's pretty sharp. And then to add it all up, make sense of somebody interrupted the thing. So this went on. That is one of the first moves that sent tech in this. That's probably why they had to hire so many people instead of 16 to do all of this kind of stuff.
Well,
Because they were doing it all over the company, not just the injection molding, the sheet metal everywhere. Pathetic. Better not quote me on this.
Well, one of the things that I remember when we were living in Vancouver is I had went in a few times to the plant to pick Lee up or for some reason. And you would go into the back and they would have like, I don't know how many machines they
About
had there.
20.
About 20 machines. And then you would go into the front part and there was just this sea of desks, hundreds of desks. Well, you know, one machine can
At
only
least
support,
60.
one machine can only support so many desks.
I would guess we only had 15 machines and would have at least 80 support personnel. And it's
You just
it should be the other way
You
around.
aren't supporting those many people with those machines. It just
in
isn't
our
possible.
place that we run now, a highly sophisticated company. You got to come out and see it. We have 13 almost new, with robots, new machines. We have 13 employees, and
Plus management you're talking about.
well, 3, yeah,
Yeah.
3 management, and those they're not each running a machine. They're doing secondary work, trimming parts and stuff like that, shipping them, all that. There's about 5 guys on average that are running these 13 machines. So we have a ratio of almost 1 to 1. So theoretically, if we had 15 machines there, maybe even give them 30 people in the office, not 100 or whatever it was.
Yeah.
But that wasn't just us. That was all. They'd moved a plant into Wilsonville, same thing,
Yeah.
highly inefficient.
Yeah, out of
Now,
breath, I-
Maria was an engineer? For
Yeah, and a sharp engineer.
Okay.
Were there a lot of women that worked on the floor?
Quite a few. They
Uh-huh.
were very good. Now, I was going to backtrack a little bit. When I first went to Tech with 1,000 people, everybody was just a first-class person you could visit with. But then a program came along where they had to hire so many disadvantaged people, which was a good program.
Uh-huh.
But we got lots of people, good workers and everything. But you'd start hearing a lot of swear words. When I first went there, you didn't hear anybody swear. I don't think you could smoke on the job. There was hardly any smokers. My lead man, Ivan Arnold, who I mentioned, bought a new car. And he also took people, what do you call them when you take people with you?
Oh, carpool.
Carpool. He said, hey, with my new car pool, there's no smoking in this car. Well, at that time, that was kind of, he was kind of a hard nose to say that. He was ahead of his time in so many ways. But then gradually the swearing came in. You had more people that were drinkers. You can tell drinkers if they're excessive drinkers just by the way they look. And the overall, I shouldn't say the quality of the
morale
people.
maybe too?
Well, the morale goes down with that. Yeah. So gradually, naturally, when you have 24,000 people, you can't because at first they could be very selective, and then gradually the government sort of, here we're selling most of our scopes are going to the government, so you got to hire. In fact, we hired people that got out. In my group, there was a guy that was a murderer. He got out several, and he was a sharp mathematician. He was, when I was in I wish I could think of his name. It wasn't his real name. And I was one of the few people that, because I was actually, there was Howard Lewis that was over me, and then I was over him. And Howard Lewis and I, and top management, were the only ones that knew he was a murderer. For the life of me, I can't remember his name. I'm going to look up Howard Lewis sometime. But a good worker, so it was certainly a case. I think his big thing that he held up a train. In the old days, he was an old guy. At that time, he was probably 60, and I was maybe 30 at that time. And so he might have been the guy that held up that famous train And in the holdup, they managed to murder a couple of people. But anyway, we're way off base here.
Why do you think the high-tech industry has worked in Washington County and stayed here?
Very obvious. It's so obvious. It's because they've got to start from tech. And all of these startup companies and the government, the Democratic government, supports all. They bought in all these schools to support Tektronix and Norm Winstadt's company. And Intel is always supportive of technology, state of the art. It's Tech and Intel, Norm Winstad, Howard Wallem, and all the, even Earl Wanton and all those guys.
And don't you think that tech encouraged little startups too?
Oh well, the other thing was they did. I stayed away from classes or whatever you call it because I wanted to work. I was probably not a good employee. I wanted to do a good job for 8 hours and go home, have free time, not go to classes, not anything, not have to think about work tomorrow because I try to keep my job simplified. So your answer, I only took about that one course. I took a little drafting class once. About that size. But that was one of the things they succeeded. Oh, the big thing is, you could take anything. If I wanted to be, if I'd wanted to take an electronic course, Tektronix would have paid for it. Or if I wanted to learn more about CNC, injection or not, but to make the mold, we'll pay for it. You just come back in, maybe later on they might have been a little charged, I don't know. But it boils down to education. And the guys that started Tektronix. I guess you probably knew that Intel almost didn't occupy this building right down here, the first one. You don't know that story, Okay.
Were a lot of your clients today some of those spin-offs from Tektronix?
What we had, I built up. My big client was the dental industry. Did I already tell you that story? No. Well, anyway, then when I came back in '83, I knew I had to get business. So every day, I looked in the phone book, and we didn't have resources like the Google now that we have and all that. But anywhere I could look up the trade magazines or anything, because we did get those, a plastic trade magazine that had ads in it and stuff, and information about how to mold, and names of companies perhaps. So I happened to one day, so I'd call 5 people on the phone a day. And so many of them were interested, and none of them were impolite. And so I got hold of this Maris Dental. Is that what it was called then?
I think so. Well, I don't know if it was called that, but I think so.
Yeah, Maris Dental in Bend. Have you heard of Maris Dental?
No.
Well, they were a spin-off of, what's the company that makes the valves over
I'll think of it in a second.
knows so much. Anyway, they were a spin-off, a company, and you'll know the name, that makes valves and stuff. So a dentist...
Williams Air Control.
Williams Air Control. And they started up right after the war. So if you go into a dentist's office, they have all this air equipment blowing out stuff, and they have water that goes along. So there's a lot of electronic plastic parts, I should say. And so I got a hold of the purchasing agent there, a very nice guy, and he and his chief mechanical engineer came into my little shop in the back. By then I had my first machine and 2 homemade machines that could produce pretty big parts by my standards. So they came in, and especially the engineer. He was a hands-on guy. He just loved my little shop because he had grown up doing things. He didn't just go to college. In fact, I'm not sure if he went to college. And so right away he liked, and we hit it off right away. So then by that time I maybe was making a part, or maybe they came in for the first part. I don't remember that. But they went back, and pretty soon, every week or so, I'll show you some of the parts sometime. made some parts for them, little parts. And then I got a very sophisticated part. I wish I had time to.
Oh, that.
You know, out
Are you
where my
talking
drill
about that
press
clear
is,
one?
honey,
That clear one?
where my drill press is, I have all those, and get the one with the threads in it.
Oh, yes. That one.
So I make a part. Now, if I'm going on to get me off this tangent, would
Oh,
you
it's
like
all right. No.
a part this big around and this long with about an 1/8 inch wall thick, and it had threads in it. Now it's like the threads on a thermos bottle. They're not tight threads. They're very coarse threads. Well, my little reason for my little success, not compared to the big guys, little success, was when these people would call me, Maris in particular. They'd say, well, can you, we need a screw machine part. Can you make that? Oh, yeah, I can do it. Or we need a sheet metal part. Yeah, I can do it. So with my resources from tech, I knew guys that had left, and they had bending machines, they had screw machines. So that made it easy for them. I would get these sorts of parts made. So we got this big part that's too big for your machine. Oh, that's okay. I'll make the mold and I'll get it farmed out and we'll mold it. So it was about a 2 ounce part, close to 2 ounce. And my homemade machine would only go up to 1 ounce. So they just sent me a complex drawing and maybe a part. I'm not sure if they had a part or not. So I took it to this same mold maker that I told you that worked out of the shop. He gave me a hell of a good deal on it. Unbelievable. And so I made it, and I had a guy, M&M Molding, over in the Selwood district. Took it over to him. It was a nice mold. He put it in, but it was unscrewing. Now when you have to unscrew a part, first of all, you got to put a lot of mold release on it so it'll unscrew. So he didn't do it while I was there. Unfortunately, I was home. He said, oh, we can't do this. He said, we got 2 shots and it's just too much trouble. And I went out and tried to tell him how he could do it. No, he got negative. So I picked up this mold. It was probably the most expensive mold I'd ever made to this time. $2,000 or $3,000. Most of my molds were under $1,000. And I said, if I can't do this,
We're in trouble.
well, just set it down here. I'll get that one. I won't get into all these other ones. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It was about this size.
I'll find it.
It was about this size. It doesn't matter. It weighed twice as much. I could have molded this on my 1 ounce machine. So I looked at my 1 ounce machine and said, I gotta do this. So I was able, I told you about this big cylinder that come down.
Mm-hmm.
So at that time I only had a cylinder this big. So I planned ahead and I had lots of big air cylinders. So I said, if I took this big cylinder and put up there and made it a long stroke, it might be able to shoot out 2 ounce part. And this machine, I said, it just might be able to. So I took the weekend and did that, got that all. Because also, just a couple of miles from me was a real sharp machinist that could cut that thing down to make it the right height and hook up to it and stuff. So I went over and he did a lot of work for me, so he gave me priority. So over the weekend I got this done. And then had to do some things here to get this bigger, to set this big mold in there. So, okay, I do it manually, do everything, not automatic. Close the mold, get the clamp, builds up pressure, and then fire that, bang! I put a lot of mold resists on it. Yeah, the parts are all there. And, oh, it's so hard to get off, oh God. But I could do it just with my hands. So I said, wait a minute. And it was a certain color. It was called, do you remember the color?
Oh, yeah.
It was an
Some kind
interesting
of gray color.
Yeah, it was an interesting color.
Yeah, I cannot find it.
Anyway,
think there'd be one in
chinchilla
here.
gray was the color.
Chinchilla.
Oh, yeah,
So-
chinchilla gray.
so
Kind
I
of
had to
pinky
order-
gray.
Barbara, there's a gray one right there into that box on this
So
side.
it cost a
See,
lot of extra money to order material that had the color in it. But I had to bite the bullet and buy 100 pounds. which would be twice the price
Oh,
a
yeah, it's one
100
of those.
natural pounds would be. But also, this was ABS. This is ABS here. It's a nice hard material. But I said, you know, if we ran that out of polypropylene, we have some of that would unscrew easy. So I got a hold of the bag of polypropylene with chinchilla grade and put it in there and purged out the other stuff. And bang, open up, take my hand and screw it. But later on I even made a little device to make it easier. Just come out, and they said, yeah, polypropylene doesn't make it. In fact, it's better because they can wipe it off better. It doesn't, it's very just slippery, you know. So that's the story of that. We made a lens there. I stuck my neck out to make that on my small machine. That's for a backup, like for a,
For a Corvair.
no, not a Corvair, but a Falcon.
Oh.
About a
Ford?
62 Ford Falcon, something like. Now that is hard to make.
Yeah.
It has this kind of thing there.
Remember these? We
That's for
we
medical.
made
Oh.
100 million of those.
This was the first
Oh, really?
part that I made for Maris. In fact, there's about 5 little dental companies around, and they all know one another because all of them worked at that company,
Oh yeah, Williams there.
Williams Air. So when they found out I was making these actually I started making them for Forrest Medical. It was a little guy that had a small and then Maris found out about it, so they made them, and then Maris made the similar thing, but just a slight change. But see how easy these are? Now this was too big to run on my original but I could just kick these out every 30 seconds, just like that. And then there was a smaller size. Well, eventually we made a 50 cavity die. So on my bigger machines we could sit 50 of these at a time.
Yeah, where they cut off. When
And then
come
they
out.
automatically cut off. So
Oh.
I supported all the kids in the neighborhood. This Jeremy Benedict,
Yeah.
I pay them by the piece, like a tenth of a penny apart. So those kids could just go,
They could cut
because
those
they were
parts
paid.
off so
They'd
fast.
make,
They would race to
they'd
see who
make
could do it the
minimum
fastest.
wage or better. Every kid in the neighborhood, they'd come over, got anywhere, because we were making these by the
Oh,
20,000s
so
maybe,
many
Wow.
at a
or
time.
more. And then they went to different ones, and then they would trim these little things too. But you see, with kids, they could watch TV. We had TV then. But if you paid them by the hour, it would cost me more. But that worked out, and it taught them all. My son John did a lot of trimming
He was
because he
really-
wanted
he was
money.
really
He
fast
could just
at
take
it.
that
He was really fast.
just like that.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I'm
would-
proud of that.
Who
That's
would
the
think they would all be
thing I'm
working
most
in our
proud of.
company?
All of those kids, I taught them how to work.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
it's true. It's the best thing.
Maybe
to
about
teach
a dozen
people.
kids in the neighborhood when they were 10 years old.
Wow.
So look at this as like the history of our life here.
Yeah.
But that is something you should mention about tech. All of these companies around here were guys that left tech. And they hired people, and they trained people. So, again, all these people, why the electronic companies coming here, there's people that can do things here
Yeah.
in Oregon. Such a nice place to live.
Did Jim
I was-
Callender work at Tech too?
Yes, he did. Another one of my friends. I was so happy to step off the plane, and it was raining and about 40 degrees, was
Yeah,
it?
when we came back from
After
Lisa,
2 weeks
the
of
air
hot weather,
smells
I
really
appreciate
crisp
it.
and fresh. That was nice, but it was
Excellent.
cold.
Yeah. Well, I think we're about ready to wrap up and everything. If you have
bored
Wait,
you to death, bored you to
no,
death
not
with
at all.
my
It's been
story.
fascinating, and I really
Well,
appreciate
if you
being
have,
able to see
if you
some of
want
this
to
stuff too.
clarify anything, I'm as close as your computer or phone.
Okay.
I'm usually easier to get on the computer. Do you have our card and all that?
I have your contact information.
LB
You know,
Mason one.
If you ever have
Okay.
time, you should give us a call and we'll take you out to our plant. You can go through it.
Yeah, that would be
Oh,
really
you would
interesting.
enjoy my
Yeah.
plant.
It's so different than when we were in our little tiny building behind our house. Now we have this great
Now
big
we only
10,000
work-
square foot building. And
We only work Monday through Thursday. We instigate the 10-hour day, 4 days a
excellent.
week. Our
Yeah.
employees all like
And we're very unique because there are very few companies that don't run 24/7 in plastics, and we just run 4 days a week, and we shut it off at night and go home.
Then we did the same
Pretty
thing that
unusual.
Tektronix did. We shut down between Christmas and New Year's and pay our employees for it.
Oh, wow.
And they've never been Well, we've let employees go, but so I suppose they've gone on unemployment.
There was
checks.
one lady that's working for us now that she said she was working for some other company and they were working a lot of overtime and she has children and she said she just hated working so many hours. And she said when she heard about a company that only worked 4 days a week, she said she couldn't go fast enough to apply.
We
She
have
said it was great.
practically all national. We have Spanish people from Guatemala
Yeah.
and Mexico and one other country down there.
El Salvador.
We have a man from Vietnam. We have a Japanese fellow that was born over here. The Vietnam guy was born in Vietnam. And we have do we have an American Indian? I guess we don't.
I don't think so.
It seems like
I
there's
think
some
they're
other
gone.
race.
Mhm.
Well, we have these
But it's like the United
few,
Nations. Yeah.
a few white guys too. only, do you know we only have one white guy on the floor? Not, Mexicans are brown, aren't they?
Mhm.
You call Mexican. That would be Kevin.
Yeah.
You realize
So
that?
how many women do you
I
got?
just maybe a little better than 50%.
Half women.
All hard workers. I don't know how they do it. We have a little rule at our company that might sound not too good to people. Nobody sits. Everybody stands. Even the officers of the company. Except we have a lunchroom.
There's no
Mhm.
chairs.
Because my youngest son studies that stuff and read articles where don't provide chairs. It's people, like a lot of people are sitting down when they're working.
Yeah.
But they're slow to get up to open gates, and it's significant at the end of the day.
Well, and the
And
other
they get
thing
a
is
break
you're
every
a little
2
more
hours.
alert if you're standing up than if you're sitting down. And
Uh-huh.
when you're running a machine, you have to be really alert. The machine
And you
can
can
lull
walk
you.
back and
Mhm.
forth, and you're right there standing where you can push a button if a red light comes on,
Mhm.
to
For safety.
stop things.
Yeah.
And you can walk back and forth in front of the machine, to get a little, just a step or two makes a big difference in how you feel at the end of the day.
Except for me, I get a stool if I'm running a machine. I don't have to do it anymore.
So there
It's
is
gonna be a real
another,
crisis for me to
there
go
is a
into
couple
work
of
again.
other companies you should talk to,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the guy that runs, my other friend that rose quite high. He's got a big company, Quality Plastics. What's his name?
Okay. Let me think a minute.
The reason I wanted to talk to him, he worked for the first molder in Portland. And he's a guy probably my age. Lee Dundas. Leland, actually, but we called him Lee Dundas, Dundas. And his company now is called 3D Plastics. It's in Newburgh. He's got his 2 sons running it, a highly sophisticated company. At one time he was real big with lots of employees, but then he sold that, and the people he sold it to went bankrupt
They
in a
just
couple of weeks.
ran- no,
Kind of like
couple of years. It
that
didn't take 'em very
Tektronix plant
long.
I was telling you went
Couple
out of
years,
business.
Yeah.
And they thought they could run it, but Leland built it up. And his 2 sons are running the company now, so if you might even enjoy going out to Newburgh and an interview. And the other one is this guy at, he's in Wilsonville now. Vision Plastic.
Oh,
You
Vision.
know his name? Just give me one more second, because he's an important guy for a couple of reasons.
They do blow molding, don't they?
No,
Rotational
they're
molding?
highly sophisticated.
But don't they do rotational molding too?
I don't think so. They might.
I thought they did.
I'll come up with his name in about 30 seconds. The story on the fellow, while I'm thinking about his name, he's the first guy going way back to about the time Kennedy came through, so let's say 64. He came into my pre-production area and wanted some information. He was a young guy, at least 10 years younger than me. And right away you meet certain people.
Mm-hmm.
I said, this guy is smart, to myself, just by the questions he was asking. So then I asked him a few, and he was about the first guy at Tektronix that learned how to make molds using CNC. So, and he's just a young guy, just out of college. And so, brilliant. So he worked for Tech and started his own company. Vision Plastics is the name of his company. And he's in Wilsonville and got big contracts. It was very high priced because he realized he could get it. I didn't care for that for him. He was really ripping Tektronix off. But don't say that. After I retired and got a fairly sophisticated bit, they sent me a few jobs, but this fella, they came out, there's another big mistake they made, if you can bear with me. The head of merchant says, look, there's a dozen molding companies we're doing business with. Let's cut it down to a couple. It's too many. We'll cut it down to 2 and then really closely watch them. Well, we were the ones that got cut out. And this Vision Plastics and these guys just for setting up a machine, $500. I'd have done the same thing for $100. In fact, I did. But the news theory was you work with a couple of companies and then you kind of watch what they're doing. And the buyers know nothing about molding. When they say it's $500 to set up this little part, they don't know that they got it set up in 10 minutes because they know nothing about it. So they hire buyers for plastic parts that know nothing. Now the good ones in the old days used to go out and they get explained. Yeah. Oh, this great big mold. Well, how long does that take you to set up? Oh, about 3 hours. Well, this little one. Oh, 20 minutes. Well, then on these little parts, it should be $30 to set up, which was about what we charged. Big one, $100. But anyway, Ron Stevens, RonStevens. Now, one reason where he got a lot of money to expand his business, he married the daughter, I guess it would be, of the guy that runs Shiloh Inns. You know Shiloh Inns? Yeah. Very successful businessman. In fact, did he also run Hollywood?
I don't know.
But I don't know if it was his daughter or if it was some relation that kind of bankrolled him. Money was no object. Well, if you can build a state-of-the-art plant, you're going to get business. We started, I told you about that molding machine. I'm starting to boast. I got to watch that. This is just for you. I bought this molding machine for $200. Did I already tell you that? And that's the only money we ever put into the company.
Wow.
We never borrowed a nickel. It all came from these little profits that we made from Maris and building up the business, it still does. Now for the first, from when I came back in 83 till 98, I sort of stepped slightly aside, although I'm still the chief executive. The average was 30% per annum. But not only was it an average, it never went below 25 every year. And then since then, they've maintained that thing and gone up even higher some years. But I think the average is still 30%, which is a pretty hard record to beat.
Yeah.
I don't think they can grow much more without losing their minds.
Oh, we don't want it. Our big problem is holding it, like Tektronix should have done. They never should have, number one, they never should have gone on the stock exchange. Then the stockholders started running the company instead of the people. That was the kiss of death when they went on the stock market. Believe me. So we're fighting. You see, what's happened, you should have lots of customers. We're down to practically one customer that does 90% of our business. Because he pays us all the time and gives us more jobs. We can't turn him down. He has his own molding company, Wilson Sporting Goods. They have their own molding company, but they send the stuff to us because of the service. So with this Lee Dundas say, we gathered up about 30 molds and just sent to Lee Dundas. Normally when you do that, you say, okay, when you do that, send us 10% or something. Glenn, I think he made a mistake. We could hit hard time. He just gave them. They couldn't believe it, these Dundas boys. Lee Dundas' son.
Yeah,
I'm kind of happy we did because
we gave them all the
it worked out, and
business.
they're servicing our guys. We didn't want to let them down and send them to some guy that would rip them off.
Wow.
So now that you found a way, come on out more often.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you very much for
It's
giving me your
interesting,
time and
isn't
your
it, doing
thoughts.
this?
And yeah.
Yeah.
When you have time, we'll drive out to Aurora now. Is where they build the planes. Have you been out there at all?
Yeah, actually.
Oh,
I
you've
have.
been there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.